The clay pot. The young monk Kaito walked along the dusty path on Mount Fuji, feeling a profound sense of unease. A feeling of emptiness consumed him, despite years of study and hours of meditation. He wondered if enlightenment was just a mirage and if his purpose in life was as hollow as the pot he carried to fetch water. He stopped at the river's edge, where his master, the venerable Genshin, was waiting, seated on a rock. Kaito placed the pot on the ground with a thud, and his master, without looking up, pointed to a small, muddy puddle left by recent rains. "Kaito, what do you see in that puddle?" Genshin asked. "Only mud and dirty water, master," the young man replied, frowning. "Take your pot," Genshin commanded. "Fill it with that water, then bring it to me." Kaito obeyed. With trembling hands, he plunged the pot into the muddle. The murky water and mud mixed together, creating a thick paste. The well-being he sought seemed as unreachable as the opposite bank of the river. "Do you feel the pot is full, Kaito?" his master asked. Kaito held the pot. Its weight was undeniable, yet the feeling of emptiness remained, as if the mud merely masked it. "Yes, master, it is full, but it isn't clean water. It's dirty," he said with disappointment. Genshin did not answer immediately. He stood up and walked down a small path that led into the forest. Kaito followed, carrying the heavy pot. The silence of the woods was broken only by the crunch of dry leaves beneath their feet. They arrived at a small clearing where, in the center, was a beautiful porcelain vase, finely carved and impeccably shiny. Beside it was a stone bowl filled with crystal-clear water, freshly collected from a spring. "Now, Kaito, observe these two pots," Genshin said, gesturing to his and Kaito's. "Which of the two is truly full?" Kaito looked at his clay pot, full of mud. Then he looked at the porcelain one, impeccable and empty. He felt confused. "Mine, master. Mine is full of mud," he replied. "And mine, though empty, is capable of holding clean water. Do you understand?" Genshin asked with a profound look in his eyes. Kaito remained silent. He didn't understand the lesson. He looked at his heavy, dirty pot. Then he looked at Genshin's, empty but pure. "Master, I feel like this pot of mud. I feel the weight of my worries and attachments, but my soul feels empty. I try to fill myself with knowledge and meditation, but nothing seems to purify me," Kaito said, a lump in his throat. Genshin sat down again, this time on the earth, next to the bowl of water. He dipped a bamboo cup in it and offered the water to Kaito. "Kaito, a pot full of mud cannot receive clean water. For the water that enters to be pure, the pot must be empty and clean from within. The meaning of life does not reside in what you accumulate, but in your ability to let go of what contaminates you." The old master stood up and continued speaking in a soft, serene voice. "You feel empty not because you lack something, but because the vessel of your being is so full of mud that it leaves no room for inner peace. To find fullness, you must first empty yourself. And that, my dear Kaito, is an act of liberation." Kaito sat next to his master, absorbing his words. He looked at his clay pot and, for the first time, didn't see it as a symbol of his failure, but as an opportunity. "But, master, how do I empty the pot? I have meditated endlessly and repeated the mantras you taught me, but the mud doesn't go away," Kaito asked, his voice filled with desperation. Genshin walked over to the small bowl of crystal-clear water. With a branch, he stirred it until the water became cloudy. Kaito watched the clean water turn dark. "The path to emptiness is not an act of force, but of patience," Genshin said. "The mud settles when you stop stirring it. It doesn't leave with violent effort, but with stillness. To empty your pot, you must stop filling it with more thoughts and worries. The old master stood up and walked to a nearby clearing. He pointed to a small lotus flower growing in the middle of the muck. Look at the lotus flower. It is born from the deepest mud, yet its beauty is pure and immaculate. True fullness is not found by avoiding the mud, but by blossoming in spite of it. The void is not the absence of something. It is the presence of possibility. It is the space that allows beauty to emerge. Kaito understood. It wasn't about getting rid of the mud in his life, but about learning to live with it without letting it define him. It was about finding purity in the midst of imperfection. Kaito returned to the spring and knelt, holding his clay pot. With a serene gesture, he tilted it and let the mud pour slowly onto the ground. The muck mixed with the dry leaves and disappeared into the forest floor, nourishing the roots of the trees. The pot felt lighter. "Master, is this how one empties it?" Kaito asked, with a sense of relief he hadn't felt in years. "No, Kaito. Emptying the pot is not a one-time act. It is a continuous process," Genshin replied. "Every time you accumulate a worry, a judgment, or an expectation, you fill your pot again. The work of the soul is not to seek a perfect pot, but to learn to empty it again and again." Kaito watched as the last remnants of mud came off the sides of the pot. He realized that the feeling of emptiness wasn't a problem to be solved, but a necessary condition for something new to enter. The path to fullness is not the path of accumulation, but of renewal, Genshin said. The porcelain pot you saw is an ideal, not a reality. The true pot of your being is made of clay. It is in a constant state of change. Kaito smiled. Finally, the lesson had sunk in. The meaning of life wasn't to have a pot full of precious objects, but to have an empty pot, ready to be filled by the experiences of each day. Kaito sat beside his master and looked at his now clean clay pot. He felt a lightness that went beyond the object's physical weight. It was a deep tranquility. "Master, I feel a great peace. The emptiness that once tormented me now feels like a space of opportunity," Kaito said, his eyes shining. Genshin nodded. "The void is like a blank page. If you fill it with the story of yesterday, you have no space to write today's. Happiness is not in having a pot full of water, but in the ability to fill and empty it at will." The master stood up. "Now go back to the river. Go to the same bank where you scooped up the mud." Kaito stood up without hesitation, his pot in hand. When he arrived, he knelt down, and instead of searching for the muck, he sought the river's cleanest current. He plunged the pot into the crystal-clear water. When he pulled it out, he saw it filled with a purity he hadn't imagined. "Do you feel the weight?" Genshin asked. "Yes, master, but it's a different kind of weight. It's a weight of possibility and hope," Kaito replied. "That is fullness. Not the kind that accumulates, but the kind that flows. The purpose of life is not to accumulate, but to experience the cycle of filling and emptying with gratitude. The water we drink today is not the same as the water we will drink tomorrow. Likewise, the beauty and well-being in your life will always be new, as long as you let the old mud go." Kaito returned to the monastery with his pot, now filled with clean water. Each step felt light, as if he were walking on clouds. The weight of his worries was no longer on his shoulders. The pot wasn't just a container for water. It had become a reminder of the most important lesson of his life. "Master, I have emptied the mud and filled the pot with clean water. What now?" Kaito asked, with a new curiosity that had replaced his former desperation. "Now, Kaito, share that water with the thirsty," Genshin said. "The true purpose of the pot is not to be full forever, but to serve others. Emptiness and fullness only have meaning when they connect to the rest of the world. The water you keep for yourself becomes stagnant. The water you share flows and is renewed. Kaito understood that the path of awakening wasn't a solitary one. It wasn't about reaching a state of personal perfection, but about using that well-being to nourish others. The pot, which was once a symbol of his pain, had been transformed into a tool of compassion. He went to the village where people were working in the sun. He carefully offered fresh water to the farmers and the children. Each time someone drank, the pot felt more full with a different kind of happiness. One that didn't come from what he had, but from what he gave. As the sun set, Kaito returned to the monastery with the pot almost empty. He showed it to Genshin. "Master, the pot is empty again, but I feel more full than ever," Kaito said, a profound serenity radiating from his being. "And that is how it should be, Kaito," Genshin said. "Fullness is not found in a full pot, but in the act of emptying it. Your soul is a river, not a pond. The meaning of life is not to accumulate, but to flow." Kaito knelt, his head bowed in a gesture of deep respect and gratitude. The weight he had carried for years, the emptiness that had tormented him, had been replaced by the lightness of letting go and the joy of serving. He no longer felt empty because he had nothing, but felt full because he was capable of giving everything he had. And from that day on, whenever Kaito felt his pot filling with worries, he would return to the river, empty it, and fill it anew, understanding that the true treasure was not in the vessel, but in the act of constant renewal.